more curious what you have on your mind. Failure of the color revolution.
Well, in terms of the color revolution here in Serbia, it was obvious the last time we talked that it has pretty much failed.
Right.
It's more obvious right now. There are still some actions going on, people trying to lit the fire and keep the fire going, but honestly, it's dead right now.
Yeah, the problem with all those things is that if you can't transition it to some sort of like new form of government or some sort of political party or some sort of like lever of governmental control, it's guaranteed to fail. Because I mean, that's the whole point of having government is you control something. And the revolutionaries don't really control anything; they just control a narrative and some excitement. But if that doesn't transition to some sort of political power, it doesn't really go anywhere. It's just exciting. Really exciting.
I don't know what the full idea was.
Right.
Because on the one hand, you had the president who was popular.
Right.
On the other hand, you had the parliament, which is filled with the men loyal to the president.
Of course, that's kind of how these things go.
And I don't fully understand where the revolutionaries were coming from. What was their idea? Was their idea potentially to have a prosecutor go out against the president?
Okay, good luck with that.
Maybe, because you have to understand the prosecutors here are independent. So,
okay, that's good.
Well, it depends. If they're independent, you're always dependent from somebody.
Right.
So there is a possibility that they were looking for some kind of influence done by the Americans or the EU on the prosecutors in order to go ahead against the president.
Oh, wow. Did the U.S. actually take a position on that?
Well, this is where the U.S. elections played out majorly here.
Oh.
Because
all right, explain that. That's interesting.
Well, the Serbs, and by extension the government, got a favorable result because Trump won.
Okay, so they are pro-Trump, I guess, then.
Yes, very much, because to put it in a nutshell and to say it very bluntly, he sees us as something like human beings. Okay. As opposed to the Democrat Party, which I very much doubt that they see us as humans at all.
I'm actually sure they pay no attention to Serbians. So yeah, you're probably not too. I don't think it's quite as dire as you make it sound, but it's not much better than that.
Yeah, from observing what was happening both here in Serbia, but also in the neighboring states like Montenegro and Bosnia, yes, I would say that in terms of the Democratic Party, we had absolutely a U.S. party that is completely opposed to Serbian interests, and voting for Trump was basically a Hail Mary move.
Well, I will tell you, just from a U.S. perspective, in general, we don't really know much about Serbia overall. And what little we do know, we pretty much assume they're like really pro-Russian. So Democrats would be fairly anti-Russian. So by proxy, because we perceive you all as being very pro-Russian, you would be anti-Democrat. Yes, but
yes, that's a good explanation. Are we that pro-Russian? I'm not that sure, actually.
I mean, I kind of get it because everybody that's kind of smaller needs some sort of sponsor state, and it's pretty obvious that the U.S. isn't going to do anything for you. The Russians are pretty much your neighbors. You know they're doing stuff around you, so it would be kind of good to be nice to the people that are right next to you and make your life miserable. So I kind of get the Serbian leanings towards Russia. And the other thing we talked about a few episodes ago, the fact that we did bomb you in the 90s, in the Serbian mind, this is still like a thing. It's like, wow, you guys bombed us. Most of the people in the US have completely forgot about that. In fact, I'm not sure I could find 10 people that remember that.
But as an aside,
Yeah.
so obviously what you're saying is very correct. Some people in Serbia love Russia, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Most, I don't know if they're the majority as such, but most of the people in Serbia realize that Russia did not bomb Serbia as opposed to the US, Britain, Germany, and so on and so forth. So that gives Russia points already at the start of the race.
That's
Okay,
funny. Now I think about it, the Russians are the only major power that hasn't screwed you guys over at some point in the last 100 years. Really?
well, I don't know installing Tito, whether that's a Russian thing or that's a Soviet
Oh,
thing, but uh,
yeah.
we'll talk about it at some other time.
I
Anyways,
really want to get into that at some point, but that's not the topic for today at
yeah,
all.
we'll get there. No worries. Anyways, what I wanted to say is,
Mm,
for instance, and I'll finish up the American influence at this point.
okay.
Um, there is somebody that is supposedly close to Trump or his family or his interests or whatever,
Oh,
uh,
right.
who is willing to construct a hotel in downtown Belgrade,
Really?
and that
Okay.
hotel is supposed to be in the place of the demolished General Staff building,
Oh,
which
really?
is which is kept which is kept as a ruin, which was ruined during the NATO bombing.
Right. Yeah. Wow. I did
Yeah,
not know. Makes things a lot way more interesting then. I didn't know they were doing that.
the government is pushing it seemingly very hard for this,
Right.
and obviously this would be a replacement. This building is obviously a reminder that US bombed us,
Right.
and instead of it, they're willing to allow obviously somebody who's pro-Trump to
Right.
build a hotel there in order to have better relations with the US.
Oh, yeah. Actually, that's like
So
a relationship changer. That's kind of cool.
exactly. So
Yeah.
so this is just to give you an idea how important it is for
Yeah.
Serbian American relations that another government here is in the US, and that the Serbs are really willing to, you know, extend a friendship hand,
Wow.
but we need to have a American government that's willing to treat us like people. Perhaps
You
not
might,
normal people, but something close to people.
you might have one now because they might actually do that if there's financial incentives for them. They generally tend to behave when there's something like that going on. Well, that might actually work out.
It's fine. People having financial incentives. If that is something that is paid for, that's fine because you have obviously lobbying in the U.S.
Oh,
People
yeah.
have financial incentives all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, Honestly, anything to get the U.S. out from out of our backs, because um, this color revolution was seemingly orchestrated probably by the CIA.
Hmm.
And
Really?
once Trump got into power, they got derailed.
Hmm.
And after that, my guess was and is that it was taken over by the British and the Germans as the organizers, and
Interesting.
they weren't successful. And this is
Hmm.
one of the things that I wanted to talk about is why they weren't successful.
I don't know. I mean, I could speculate, but you'd probably have better speculation than I would. I think really in
Well,
order for these things to be successful at all, you kind of have to have some sort of like underlying feeling of unrest in your society, like whatever form that takes. Usually it's a quality of life thing, but if there's something else that's kind of getting under anybody's skin, you kind of have to create an atmosphere of tension or agitation or just like a mad at the government so that when you try this revolution, it actually has a chance of being successful. Because if
and they
everybody's
did.
happy with your government, it doesn't happen at all.
And they did to manage to create an atmosphere of tension. They have some local, they have some TVs that are anti-government, and of course parties that are anti-government and so forth. And
Yeah.
there was this accident in on the canopy on in the railway station.
Hmm.
But ultimately, I wanted to talk about the underlying things behind this attempted revolution.
Okay.
And
That I know nothing about, so I'd love to hear what you got.
yes, this is actually my thesis.
Okay.
I think this failed revolution is the end of Yugoslavia. Finally.
Oh, you mean like the last vestiges of like the early 90s disillusion? Is that the word, disillusion? Dissolving. Because I thought like it started like 1991, 92, where states just started checking out of the Yugoslavian Republic there.
Yes, but the solution of Yugoslavia was ended, however you want to count it, in 2006 or 2008 or whatever. This is formally speaking.
After the war, then.
Yes.
The war ended like 95 or 96? 95, I think, right?
In Bosnia, 95. In Rump, Yugoslavia in 99. But of course, Kosovo proclaimed independence. Its legality is very much dubious, but nevertheless, this is not the subject of today's discussion.
Right. So what does this do for ending Yugoslavia? Then that's what I'm curious about.
Because Belgrade, and Novi Sad up to a point, and some inner cities in Serbia, they are this is where the old Yugoslav elite lived.
Oh, okay. Because I know Sarajevo's got a little different vibe to it. So this is kind of like the Yugoslavian center would be Belgrade and the cities around there, I guess.
Well, Belgrade would be definitely the Yugoslav center because this is where the Yugoslav government was at. And furthermore, there is something that will sound strange, but all the others like Croats, Slovenes, whatever, they're much more nationalistic actually in as opposed to Yugoslavia, in contrast to the Serbs.
Oh.
The Serbs viewed Yugoslavia much more favorably, as much more something that is closer to Serbia than, for instance, the Croats, who I guess never wanted Yugoslavia.
Not really. It didn't seem like it. I don't get that feeling.
No, neither do I. So
I think the problem you have there is if they ever agree to this, they're automatically going to be a minority all the time. So the Serbians are going to have 50, 60% representation. Everyone else is going to have to slice up what's left. So it's like, well, gee, do I want to enter in with a union that I'm always going to be the junior partner in? Probably not. Probably not anything you want to do.
Well, it depends. I mean, it could have worked, but this is not, again, the subject of the discussion. It didn't work.
Sorry, go ahead.
It never did work. And also, one thing that should be noted is when Yugoslavia was supposedly working,
Mhm.
it was a dictatorship.
Right. Under Tito.
Yes, under Tito, and before that, under the king.
Right.
Of course, Tito was a much worse dictatorship all around than
Sure.
what the king instituted, and he didn't institute it for a long time, but it was authoritarian after it, and nevertheless, Yugoslavia was fully democratic only a couple of years at its very beginning.
Oh, what about the end? Because Tito died in like 80, late 80s, I think it was.
In 1980.
So what
And
happened? What happened between like 80 and 91 before the war actually broke out? Was it democratic at all, or was it really sliding towards authoritarianism?
well, it was obviously a little bit less, I guess, authoritarian, but honestly, it was a basket case.
Ah, okay.
It was basically bankrupt. I don't know, in 82 or 83. It was severely in a severe crisis. It had a government um, that was arranged according to quotas. So the moment they allowed a little bit of democracy in, Yugoslavia collapsed, and it was
Oh,
it.
oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So, but when we get back to the demonstrations here in Serbia,
Yes.
so this old, well, some of them are obviously young because they're students. So, but
Right.
they're from the Yugoslav elite families.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, this was the mainstay, the main force of the protesters.
Hmm. So were these families that were invested in the old Yugoslavia, or were these families
Yes,
that were that? Ah, okay.
these are the families that lived in inner cities, in particularly in Belgrade, but also Novi Sad. And
So,
it's
okay.
it's kind of obvious. It's kind of obvious that they belong mostly to the old Yugoslav elite. So this is
Ah,
one part.
yes.
This is one part of the protesters.
Hmm.
So old Yugoslav elite, uh, very much pro EU, very much prone to socialism, or for the younger ones, communism.
Hmm.
And you had the other part of the protesters, which are actually far right,
Hmm.
which were disaffected by the government because they saw it as as they saw it as collaborating with the EU and in the US.
Oh, interesting. So these two groups didn't fight each other during this color revolution, did they? Or
No,
this protest? Oh,
they
they
worked
worked.
hand in glove.
No, that's not going to end well. They're
Well,
different goals.
different goals. Well, their ultimate goal was to topple the government,
Right. Well,
and
you can't topple a government effectively without having a plan in place to replace the government you're getting rid of.
it seems that they had some people that were being prepared to replace the
Uh,
government, but
oh,
it ultimately came up to nothing,
right.
um, because the government responded very wisely
Hmm.
and did not use force against the protesters.
How did they deal with them then?
Well, they just let the protesters be.
Oh, because they're going to run out of steam on their own. And oh, I see. So if you actually went in there forcefully, you might create more enthusiasm for them. You start cracking some heads of the students or something. They might, oh, we can't have you beat up our students, and then it might turn into a bigger thing.
Exactly.
Oh, interesting. But they avoided all that. So it's just kind of like, okay, you guys are having a protest, whatever, go back to school, study your damn books. Leave us alone.
Well, actually, they didn't come back to school. It seems that there will be a massive flunking of semesters here in Serbia because they blocked schools.
Oh, the government
And
blocked them or the students did?
no, the students.
Oh, okay, yeah, students.
Yeah, and anyways, so this is how the government, well, okay, we suffered economically because of this,
Yes.
but this was the way for the government to let these people show their colors.
Oh,
And then we come back to my thesis that
yeah,
Yugoslavia was never ever possible as a democratic society.
I see. And then this kind of gets them out in the open. So now you have like, there's no question that these guys are kind of like not in line with whatever your government's doing right now. So now they get blackballed or whatever happens from this
Well,
point.
it's not only that, it's also that these people, okay, you don't like the government, that's fine.
Right.
Well, it's really hard to say that anybody liked the government, per se, but
Yeah.
nevertheless,
Right.
yeah, it's very
Uh,
hard to like the government. Okay, it's
yeah.
truth be told,
Yeah.
but when you let these people show their colors and say, well, listen, we got this nice communist anarchist ideas of how to run the country, and listen, this is how we're going to do stuff.
Right.
The normies come up and say, wait, I didn't sign up to this.
Yes. Not what I want to do.
Yeah, so that's we get back to the same problem. uh Simply put, uh these people that are protesting are mostly Yugoslavs,
Hmm.
and this is Serbia,
Hmm. Oh. Oh.
obviously. So obviously saying there are more Serbs here than Yugoslavs.
Well, yeah, you're in Serbia,
Yeah.
but
So
oh,
it's not Yugoslavia anymore.
oh,
You can't have your people from Zagreb or Sarajevo come in and overpower somebody locally.
no.
You
That's it.
simply don't have the manpower.
No, you're talking
And
from a different part. You're talking from the Croatian part. You're talking from the Bosnian part. Well, we're Serbian. We're not going to pay attention to you.
well,
You're right.
actually,
Hmm?
there was support from Croatia for these students, which
Yeah, so,
was,
but it's
yeah,
not going to
that
be the
that
point where you're going to overthrow your government kind of support. I mean, you have to have a lot of support, and people have to be really agitated. Like, it has to be economic depression or really just your massive inflation or something. Something really bad has to be happening before that kicks in.
so what happened is that ultimately the revolution collapsed in on itself.
Right.
Now, of course, if there was a President Harris in the US,
Mm-hmm.
there could have been
Hmm.
foreign pressure, additional foreign pressure, whatever. Things might have done and went differently.
Interesting. I don't know if we actually would have. Well, we might have paid attention if Harris was in power because it kind of digressed a little bit on the American situation. We felt like we kind of had our stuff together and we can actually start paying attention to things overseas. Um, at this point, well, yeah, all those chips are off the table, which actually works good for Serbian U.S. relations. It means we're not going to meddle in your affairs at all. But if it was the other way around, yeah, we probably would have been meddling in your affairs. I'm not sure we were going to pay much attention at all right now. Different story.
which which I support wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, and I don't blame you for support. I would support it too if I were in your position. Well,
Yeah,
quite frankly, we
just
shouldn't be in your
just
business.
just yeah, just please look some other way.
Yes, exactly.
Any other way, it's fine with us.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was my thesis for today,
Yeah, how long?
is
How
that
long did this last?
ultimately
Was this like 2, 3 weeks? Or I mean, so kind of run me through the whole process of like, because obviously there was something coming up where the tension started boiling, and then they decided to pop the cork and do their revolt. How long did this take? Like a couple months or?
this is already since November, so it's 5
Uh,
months.
And then you could
Um,
be arguing what you were doing, like a lot of this is just the vestiges of what happened in the 80s, and this is like this last kind of gasp of that. I think that pretty much ends any talk of Yugoslavia at this point. I don't know why you would even think about it now.
well, it's any talk of the old Yugoslav elite being influential
Ah,
because they tried. This was their last gasp.
mhm.
They need to win elections,
Yeah,
and you can't win elections on a Yugoslav platform in Serbia because you need to have a Serbian platform.
yeah, of course. And that Serbian platform is almost certainly going to be counter to a Yugoslavian platform. So,
We are not going to make another Yugoslavia anytime soon.
no, I'm not even sure what it would take at this point if you even could do that. I don't think you
Yeah,
could
I
do
think I think Humpty Dumpty. I think
that.
Humpty Dumpty
That's a good way
is
to
done.
put it.
Okay.
The yolk's
Yeah.
like
It.
all over the mountains, man. There's yolk everywhere.
So I'm not sure that Yugoslavia was ever a good idea. Again, it
Yeah,
was tried. It was tried in a democratic way, in
yeah.
a authoritarian way with the king, in a totalitarian way with Tito, and honestly, it never worked. So
So I guess
whatever.
the question for you though, if they, because it seems like a lot really happened at that point, 41, where they switched to the king and the king decided he was going to throw his lot in with the Western Allies. So then the Germans said, "Oh no, you don't. We're going to come wipe you out." I wonder if they had not made that switch, if they would have had a chance. Because pretty much when you invaded, of course, conquered Yugoslavia, but more importantly, they reshuffle the deck. So now everybody that was kind of locked into some sort of like political network or whatever, they kind of blew that wide open. And now you had to reconstruct something new from that. And what they remade was never going to resemble Yugoslavia. It was going to be something completely different.
That's a subject for a whole other discussion. Yes,
That's a couple
simply
books.
put, simply put, it was never effective.
Really? Like never? At no point? Yeah,
Never.
I guess now I'm trying because I don't know anything about the war Yugoslavia, but I'm assuming it must have suffered like everyone else did in the world because there was like massive depression everywhere. So since Yugoslavia is kind of more on the fringe economically, I'm assuming the depression hurt them worse than other people. So,
Actually,
huh.
it's actually dubious because we had a very capable prime minister.
Hmm.
So it's possible that the depression was not as bad
Hmm.
as opposed to some countries, that
Right.
there was economic growth. But
Hmm.
Yugoslavia has a nationalism problem, and it simply never was able to function as a in a normal democratic way, which
Hmm.
is of course the best way to function. Honestly, because you don't want to kill each other when you switch governments.
Well, you shouldn't
Obviously,
kind of want to avoid that.
yeah, it's a good idea, not
Yeah.
shoot each other, when you exchange governments.
I guess
I
that
know
is
it's
kind of the gift of democracies. Maybe you don't kill each other when we switch rulers. That would be a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the whole point. That's
Okay.
I think that this is the whole point behind all of these demonstrations. Is it's simply they were simply based on a population that is, simply put, a minority.
Right. Oh, so they were never really going to succeed anyways, unless you could. Well, in order to succeed, you have to have some sort of like pro-Serbian hook to your things. And if you're
They tried.
staunch, I don't
They
even know
tried.
what would you do?
Yeah, they
It ha-
they tried, but they tried. There were some takers, but no, not really.
I mean, if
So
you're at that point, you have to have something external happen. It usually has to be like really bad economic issues or somebody's attacking you and you have to like rise to fight off the challenger or whatever. But you guys don't have any of that right now. None of that's going on.
Well, because neither the US or the EU is openly interfering, we don't have that kind of a problem.
Yeah, in fact, I don't think they're going to bug you at all for a while. The U.S. certainly won't. I imagine the EU kind of has a bigger fish to fry right now.
Yeah, I'm not counting on EU letting us off the hook that easy.
Well, no,
But
not
that's a tale. Yeah, that's a tale for another story. And
yeah.
I mean, for the next time, you pick the subject.
Oh, what would I do? Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to have a real obvious one. I was laughing about this current economic issue that's was self-inflicted. I would happily dig into that with some detail, just the economics. I don't really need to get anything else about this. But it's yeah. All right, we'll save that for another time.
We'll see. We'll see you in the next episode.
Yes, sir. Have a good evening.
Bye bye.
Bye.